Prior to Henry Ford building his revolutionary Model T, automobiles were merely thought to be an exclusive plaything for the rich. Back in the early 1900s, automobiles were not the main form of transportation, as horses, carriages, and walking were much more efficient and were generally not expensive. Henry Ford took all the great things about the automobile and used the assembly line to make the Model T not only easy to make, but cost efficient. This vehicle was so uncommon at the time that there was no law to how old someone had to be to legally drive. The brilliant idea of owning a cheap and reliable automobile was previously thought to be impossible, proving that Henry Ford broke a massive barrier in history. Henry Ford grew up on his father William Ford's farm. This farm was located in Spring Mills Township, Michigan, and was mainly used for storing grain and hay, even though farm animals were clearly present. On the farm, Henry helped his father several times a day. This is where Henry's fascination of tools grew from. Henry would bend metal he found on the farm and make useful tools that weren't already in their possession. After this, Henry started taking apart and putting back together watches he found around the farm. He got so good at this that many people thought he was a watch repairman. At age 13, Henry's mother would pass away. Without her, he thought being at the farm was somewhat pointless. Finally, after many more years of being on the farm, despite his father wanting him to go on and take care of it, Henry left the farm and went in search of training for a well-paying job as a machinist. One night at a New Year's party in 1885, Ford met Clara Jane Bryant, who would go on and marry Ford at the age of 21. The two would then have a single child named Edsel Ford.
Ford attended Bryant and Stratton College, which was founded in 1854. Ford would also study at the Detroit Business Institute. With his education, he would go on to redesign and innovate automotive vehicles. At the time of its release, the Ford Model T made it easier for the common man to be able to afford and to utilize a car to its full potential in that day and age. Ford made it easy for people to afford his cars primarily because of how inexpensive they were. In fact, some cars were only around $800. In addition, Ford had his wage for his employees higher than most, so that they too could afford the cars that they were making. This made Ford quite the hero. The success of the Model T had other innovators of automobiles see the potential to sell their cars to all of America rather than exclusively to Michigan. Other people such as Ransom Olds and Henry Leland produced other automobiles. Old built his cars under the name Oldsmobiles, whereas Leland built his cars under the name of Cadillac. Ford used the powers of advertising to convince buyers that his cheaper models were a better buy. With the success in advertising, Ford continued to sell more and more cars. They worked well and were easy to operate.
Since the 1900s, we're an era of pop culture and music, dancing, and owning innovative sorts of technology. Advertising was very easy to do, and the way it was done varied between companies. The best of the best companies, like the Ford Motor Company, use several types of the new advertising techniques discovered in this age. One of the techniques still used today are songs or jingles for the companies in the form of advertisement. These were either done on television or the radio. The following is an example on radio.
Lum and Abner will be with us in just a moment, but first, a short message from the Ford dealers of America. Owners everywhere are talking about the economy of the 50 Ford. Listen to what Mr. Jacob N. Wade of Lyndhurst, Virginia, one of over 420,000 delighted owners, said about his new Ford.
In these days, when the cost of everything is up, it's certainly great to own a 50 Ford. For I found that my new Ford V8 gives me everything I'd expect to find in an expensive car for amazingly little money. And in addition to being a low-cost car to buy, I find my Ford is mighty economical to own. I get 20 miles to a gallon and spend very little for upkeep. My money sure goes a lot further since I've owned a 50 Ford.
Yes, Ford owners everywhere are finding out about the economy of the great new Ford. They're saving real money now because of Ford's low price. And they'll be saving real money for years to come because of Ford's low operating and maintenance costs. But see for yourself. Tomorrow, stop by your neighborhood Ford dealers. Get the facts on Ford economy. Then take the wheel and test drive the big new Ford.
So don't be standing on the corner, watching all the Fords, watching all the Fords. Be the guy who's going by.
Ford would also go on and patent the assembly line. The assembly line was a method of making goods mass-produced by giving a big group of people one specific job, and an easy job at that. This cut down the time it took to produce automobiles and eventually other mass-produced products too. This idea of Ford's would be a leading factor to him in leading the automotive industry.
People loved their Fords and found innovative new ways to use their Fords in their lives. According to Michael Bergens, who was Henry Ford, people began to use cars in many clever ways. Farmers reconnected the motors to different farm equipment and then used them to pump water or cut hay. Some people even used their Model T to run washing machines. Fords also had radical and new ways of business. As mentioned previously, Ford had a higher wage for his workers, and he integrated more advertising techniques to convince buyers to purchase his cars, and made the cars he was producing affordable for the common man of America. With both the reputation and popularity of the assembly line, many more jobs were made. This and all made the unemployment rate decrease. This also made people pay their workers less, which you could say brought up the argument of human rights. When Ford branched out and made sister companies like Lincoln, it inspired other companies like Cadillac to also have sister companies like Chevrolet. This factor of owning more than just the base companies inspired car companies to build different cars.
Even though Henry Ford didn't believe in war, he still had the Ford Motor Company manufacturing Model Ts for military usage. As Henry Ford once said, preparation for war can only end in war. The success of the Model T led to future Ford-based projects as well, including Ford making the first ever civilian truck based off military pickup trucks. In addition, Ford's son Edsel introduced another car under the name of the first automobile that Ford introduced, the Model A. As the 15th million Model T rolled out, the Model A was reintroduced to the world.
Edsel also manufactured automobiles under the name of the Lincoln Company. In 1939, the brand of Mercury appeared. Henry did not play much of a role in the production of Mercury, as he suffered from a stroke in 1938.
2 years later, the US was back at war. Ford built warplanes, airplane engines, and the famous Jeeps. As the war raged on, Ford developed another stroke in 1941.
Seven years after Ford's second stroke, on April 7th, 1947, Henry Ford passed away from a third stroke at the age of 83. At his funeral, thousands of people paid their respects as his casket drove down the mile-long line. Many mourned the man that showed something rare in a businessman like himself at the time: equality. Even today, Henry Ford's ideas and innovations changed the world. This is proven by the Ford Motor Company Fund. Quoted directly from the Ford Motor Company, the Ford Motor Company Fund's mission is to strengthen communities and help make people's lives better.
In conclusion, the Ford Motor Company changed the world as we know it. The automobile showed its potential of how inexpensive it was to purchase and also in the simplicity of the operating system itself, thus giving Henry Ford the ability to produce an automotive empire, starting with nothing besides a passion for cars and engineering.
When comparing the advanced life we have today to life in the 1900s, it makes you think how things aren't that different. First off, right after World War I, influenza hit Michigan as well as the entire United States hard, killing over 650,000 Americans, including the owner of Dodge. Ford responded to this by quarantining many of his employees that worked for his power plants and shipyards. Today, the Ford Motor Company produced masks, ventilators, and face shields just like they did during the influenza pandemic. Secondly, after Ford making his mark in boosting Michigan's economy with automobiles, other states have made economies built on automobiles. For instance, in Reno, Elon Musk's Gigafactory is one of the biggest factories in making supplies for Teslas, thus making more jobs and boosting the overall economy. And it was all thanks to Henry Ford.